we would welcome and very good evening. Today's discussion is regarding the security management systems. It's an ISO standard. I request Fred Bhai to mute. Fred Bhai, hearing me?
স্যার শুনতে পাচ্ছি, অনেকে হচ্ছে আনমিউট করে কথা বলতেছিল, তো এর কারণে আর কি নয়েজটা আসতেছিল। আমি মিউট করে দিচ্ছি স্যার, আপনি কন্টিনিউ করেন।
Thank you. So today's session to discuss about information security management systems. It's an ISO standard. Everybody we know about ISO 27001. So before dig down to the details discussion, I would like to introduce myself and today's agenda. First of all, we would discuss very basic information about the presenter, that is about me. Then we would discuss about the information security management systems. Then we would discuss about the framework of ISO 27001. Then we would move forward to the details control discussion. And then we would discuss about how we could create an information security culture amongst the organization. And last of all, we would take question and answers. And I would request everybody to please take down your, note down your questions, and we would like to allocate some times after the discussion so that you guys have some question and we may discuss about the questions. So first of all, I would like to introduce myself. I'm MD Jahangir Alam. You already got my name. I am the MD and CEO of QA Pro Limited. And I am a OSCP certified professional hacker, as well as ISO 27001 lead auditor, lead implementer, as well as a lead trainer. And I am a CISA certified audit professionals. Also, I am a PCI QSA. As well as I have some more professional certifications and degrees. I would like to scoop that. Currently, I am leading the Open Web Application Security Project Bangladesh chapter. There's a volunteer organization mainly focused on building awareness towards developing the secure applications and software. I'm also the director CISA of ISACA Dhaka chapter, and I have more than decades of experience in banking information security management. So I would like to move forward for any purpose. I would like to request you for any purpose regarding today's discussion, please note down your question, and we obviously would discuss about your questions. And for that reason, we would allocate time after the discussion. And I would request some support from you guys who attended, and request you to please mute yourself so that we could continue our session without any interruption. So first of all, we will discuss about the information security management systems, the ISMS. The ISO 27001, the broader name is Information Security Management Systems. This information security management systems ensures the security of the information processing environment. And we know the very principles of information security is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Confidentiality seeks to disclose the information only to the authorized person. Integrity seeks to have changed the data or information by the authorized manner, and availability is the things that ensures that authorized people have access to the authorized information processing environment whenever he or she needs as per the delegation and authorization. And then we also get the risk management process in the information security management systems. So thing is, we are processing information throughout our information processing environment. We need to perform a risk assessment, and then we should manage that risk to ensure the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information processing environment. So ultimate objective is to ensure the security of information processing environment. To do so, we implement, monitor, as well as review and improve the information security management systems so that the information processing environment remains secure as required by this framework we would discuss today. Sorry. So actually, what actually the basic of implementing information processing systems?
স্যার একটু আমি ইন্টারফেয়ার করি সকল উদ্দেশ্য বলতেছি
তবে যদি বলে এখানে খাওয়া গেলে বলবে
আমার report করে দিছি।
ভাই সবাইকে আগে আনমিউট করে দিন আপনি হোস্ট
সবাইকে আমি মিউট
Ami, I would request to please help and support us. I muted all. I would request please help us to continue the session. And if you guys have discussion and related questions, obviously, we would take the questions and would discuss. No worries, please. So, actually, what's the benefits of implementing the information security management systems? First of all, we collaboratively processing information throughout our organization, throughout our people, throughout the process, and throughout the technology. And that information processing environment may have some risk area where information may be leaked or unauthorizedly accessed. So if we implement the ISMS, it would help us to improve the risk management process of our organization. It would help to comply the regulatory requirement. It will help to enhance the customer trust. And if any incident occurs during the operational activities, this framework, if we implement it appropriately, it would help us to respond any incident in a particular manner and with full view and control of that incident. And this framework, if we implement our organization, it would align the requirements of the protection of information so that the information we are processing throughout our organization would be secured and handled appropriately so that customer trust, regulatory requirement, risk management, and other incident response capacities increase accordingly. So what actually the key component to implement this framework? First of all, the organization need to develop a set of policies and related process. Then the organization should introduce the risk management process identify the control requirement and control gaps, and then implement that controls. And throughout their operational process, they ensure the monitoring of that information processing environments. And to do so, the professionals who would like to implement this ISMS framework, they must to perform the risk assessment, and which clause and requirement is applicable for that organization need to be identified. Which control the organization currently available need to be documented, and identify the gaps, what actually they perform in the current situation, and what actually the standard requires. And one of the most important requirement is to have the management commitment. If the organization and the senior management and the management would like to protect their information, and they help and support to implement this framework, only then it is possible to implement these kinds of framework throughout the organization. So management commitment is very much important in this area. Now we would like to go the details or requirements of the framework. So there are different controls and different areas discussed in this framework. First of all, the standard discuss about the scope, and then normative reference, then terms and definition, context of the organization, leadership, planning, support, operational related activities, performance evaluation, improvement, and last of all, this standard identified 93 controls in 4 groups. We would like to have a basic discussion among all these topics listed here. First of all, in first clause, the standard provides an overview of the standard. So we would like to just simply carry forward. In clause on, the standard defines and discuss about the scope. The scope actually defines in which area of that organization should to implement this standard. To do so, the organization need to identify where they would establish, implement, maintain, and how to continuously improve their organization in terms of this ISO 27001 framework. And to do so, the organization first identify the scope, and then they establish the requirement, implement the control, maintain, and continuously improve to ensure the information security management systems of the organization. In clause 2, the reference, normative reference has been identified by the standard and frameworks. Is the name of this framework, information security management, and the security techniques. In clause 3, the standard defines the terms and definition. And this ISO 27001 is mostly inherited from the standard ISO IEC 27000. So is the fact that is defined. In clause 4, the standard defines the context of the organization. In which organization would like to implement this ISO 27001, we first understand the context of the organization, which service the organization is providing, and what's actually the objectives of continuing that organization. So context is very much important. Then the needs and expectation need to be identified and understand. Then the organization define the scope and then implement the information security management system. This is standard. In clause 5, the standard discuss about the leadership. Leadership is first and very important to implement any ISO standard. Not only for this standard, but for any ISO framework or standard, management commitment and leadership is very much important. Here also discuss about the policies, organizational roles, responsibilities, and authorities in this clause. Clause 6 discuss about the planning steps. And in clause 7, the standard defines in which area is concerned to provide support to implement this framework. Different resources, competencies, awareness, communication, and different documentation is required. And that is defined in clause 7. In clause 8, the standard defines about the operational process, the operational planning and control, how to perform the risk assessment, how to treat the identified risk. And in clause 9, the standard defines and discuss about the performance evaluation. Most of the cases, we monitor the implemented controls, analyze them, evaluate. The audit team perform the audit engagement, and in some cases, the management review the process to identify the performance, evaluate the performance. And clause 10 discuss about the improvement. So once ISO 27001 or related standard implement, the things must be improved in continuous nature. That is very much important. So that's all about the clauses discussed in the framework. We would like to dig down the details controls identified in the ISO 27001. Just a second, please. Sorry, welcome back. We have received one question. My question: how we remember courses as normally as we see in interview? So yes, we would take questions and we would discuss about it in the question and answer session. Thank you. So would like to discuss about the controls. First of all, how actually the control? Would like to have a basic understanding. Control is a safeguard. We first identify the risky area. For example, in the bay of any lake or sea, there should implement some concrete block. This is because we know that when the force of water fall down to the bay or sand area, that may damage the area. So concrete block has been set as the control safeguard. For secure physical security, we implement different control mechanism to identify whether unwanted people or resources or unnecessary contents have been passed throughout the gate. So Control is the ultimate safeguard mechanism to safeguard the identified risk or threat. Threat is something that tries to exploit the control. So we would not dig down in that area, but control is something that is set to safeguard the asset from the threat or threat agent. And this is very important to have a basic understanding about control so that we could define and discuss the later section. So in ISO 27001, there are 93 total controls in 4 groups. Groups on organization control, here we would get 37 controls. People control, we would get 6 controls. Physical controls, we would get 14 controls. And technological controls, we would get 34 controls. So we would like to dig down the organization controls. There are 37 organization controls. First of all, policies for information security. To implement ISO 27001, we must to implement related policies throughout the organization. That policy, for example, we would like to establish a company-wide cybersecurity policy that must to identify and outline the acceptable uses of organizational data, different data protection standard that we would like to follow, and the incident response process, for example. So a set of policies and process should be implemented throughout the organization to implement and achieve comply the requirements of ISO 27001. Would not discuss very broadly, but would like to give a basic understanding for IS controls. Then another thing is defined information security roles and responsibilities. The organization should have appropriately defined roles and responsibilities. For example, what actually the roles of a system administrator, what would be the roles of an incident handler, what would be the roles and responsibilities of the board of directors of the organization, what would be the roles and responsibilities of the senior management team of the organization, what would be the roles and responsibilities of the chief information security officer. And each and every stages, the organization should have defined roles and responsibilities to who are concerned with the operational and management activities of that information processing environment. And to do so, considering the roles and responsibilities, the peoples must to provide the appropriate training so that they could carry out their operational activities and other activities, define roles and responsibilities with a secure manner and knowing the things, how to protect their information processing environment. Another term, control, is segregation of duties. The peoples who are concerned and who are participating in the operational activities and management activities of that information processing environment must to have visible distinguish and segregation. For example, a software developer should not have access to the production environment of that organization. In some cases, the network administrator should not have access to the database. So, in order to implement and comply with the controls of ISO 27001, we should appropriately segregate the duties so that any overlapping activities could not hamper the security principles of that information processing environment. Next control is management responsibilities. The management should have defined roles and responsibilities. And I was talking earlier that it is important, very important to have defined management responsibilities and senior management commitment to implement the ISO 27001. It's very much important. Then the contact with authorities. The organization to whom we would like to implement the ISO 27001, that organization should have contact with different authorities. For example, the organization should have some contact authorities with the local laws and enforcement, the regulatory body, the global or country's total incident response related team, or the fire service, or the fact, the things there is some authority board is concerned with the operational process of that organization, must to have clear contact with these authorities so that the organization could make some liaison if and when required to contact or connect. Then we will discuss about the control about contact with a special interest group. It may be industry specific. For example, the organization may have some cyber security related events, incident, so they should have some collaboration with the cyber security related firm or groups who may guide the best practices, and also may have some relationship or participating behavior of that organization's resources to the local or international different alliances. Then we discuss about the threat intelligence. To properly implement the information security management systems ISO 27001, the organization should respond to the incident properly. To do so, the organization should have some direct or indirect collaboration with the different threat intel and the intelligence service provider. Then information security in project management is very much important. The organization may have different projects ongoing, completed, or upcoming. The organization should think and consider information security requirement in the project management. So, one example, maybe we may integrate the risk assessment process into a ongoing project throughout the life cycle. Then we'll discuss about the control about inventory of information and other associated assets. The organization to whom we are going to implement the ISO 27001, they must to identify and define appropriately their assets. The asset list should have name of the asset, category of the asset, and particular uses of the asset, owner of the asset, purpose of the asset, location of the asset. Is very much important. And the asset inventory must be updated so that for any requirement, the concerned team may have access that asset to ensure the information security of the organization. Then we'll discuss about the acceptable uses of information and other associated asset. The organization have lots of assets, information assets. So to whom the information is to be disclosed must be defined appropriately. To do so, the organization should have acceptable users policy, bring your own device policies throughout the organization. For example, one organization may grant access to the email throughout the user's personal email, personal mobile phone. So it should be defined appropriately. For example, if any email-enabled mobile of a resources of an organization lost his or her phone, how can the system administrator or network administrator erase the data of that mobile phone must be defined appropriately. That 6, this standard. Return of asset, if any resources leave, or if any vendor or others people have some access to the organization's asset, must to have the policy how they would return their assets. Organization should classify the information so that appropriate control should may be imposed to the information processing environment and the information and data, so that the control requirement of ISMS is implemented. So most of the cases, organization may classify their data by public data, internal users data, confidential data, or secret, something like that. Labeling of information. All information processing environment and assets must be labeled. Maybe on asset, maybe a hard disk of in-house software data that must be labeled and classify accordingly, so that we could properly protect that information. Information transfer. How actually we transfer information? For example, people get access to our organization data through some file sharing activities over the internet. So is there any protection appropriately established? There's 6 in this control. Also, we would get related controls in the technological controls. Access control, very much important. Who would get access in which information? That must be defined and practiced appropriately. Identity management, very much important. Some people willing to get access our information assets, information processing environment. Is that particular person is authorized to do so? How actually we identify them? So identification, authentication, authorization is very much important to ensure the information security of organization. Authentication, to whom I would provide the access, and how actually I authenticate that person or systems to disclose the information. So most of the cases we implement nowadays 2-factor authentication. At least 2-factor authentication is very much mandatory nowadays to ensure the disclosure or unauthorized disclosure. Access right, very much important control. Who have access in which asset, that must be defined, and we should grant access based on the access right defined throughout the organization. And the information only should have control to provide access to information to whom they are providing the access. And periodic review must be ensured. For example, your ERP system may have 500 users. So which user getting which access must be reviewed on a regular interval, at least annually once. Then information security in supplier relationships. The organization may have different vendors and suppliers. So it should appropriately define and exercise the relationship to the supplier to ensure the information security requirements. So while we make some agreement with the supplier or vendor, we must to define the actual requirements, how we could collaborate organization-wide information, and that must be defined in the agreement. It may be a non-disclosure agreement or service providing agreement, or whatever the name is, that's not a matter, but the agreement must to identify and define the clauses. And in every ICT supply chain related activities, we must to manage the information security requirement, and that must have defined in the organization's information and related policies and procedures. Then monitoring, review, and change management of supplier services. One suppliers is providing these services, another suppliers providing another services. Two different supplier is providing some same types of services. What the fact? Thing is, we should regularly review the change. For example, on particular supplier may provide some services to our organization. They utilize different teams. So for example, on teams suddenly changed their resources, or they stopped their service providing. So we should review the infrastructure environment so that we could implement appropriate controls to who are not attending to provide that kinds of services or activities. Cloud services. Ensuring information security in the cloud environment is very much vital nowadays. This is because we are moving towards the cloud services. So for that organization to whom we are trying to implement the information security management systems, that is ISO 27001, we should identify whether they have cloud services or not. If they have some cloud services, we must to identify that, and this controls defined in the ISO 27001 must to implement to ensure the cloud services security. Another thing is incident management, planning and preparation. Incident is, of course, is concerned with the regular operational activities. So one may not tell that, no, there is no incident in my organization. Incident may happen. Certainly, we should have defined incident management process and planning before occurring any incident. And that planning should define what actually we would do or response, how we would actually respond to the incident if that occurs or happens. So it's very much important. And periodic training and awareness must be conducted. And especially the incident management team must to have appropriate training and awareness. And there should have defined process how to respond any incident. For any information security events, how we would assess and which action we would take must be defined in earlier stages. Then response to information security incident. If any information security incident happened, how we actually respond, to whom we would report, which people are responsible for what kinds of activities during any incident. That is very much important. Then learning from information security incident. The organization should have appropriate mechanism to learn things from any incident, and that must be defined, and the peoples who are responsible to handle the lesson learning session must to ensure the learning discussion and evidence preservation immediate after any incident. That is very important. Collection of evidence, that's mandatory. ISO 27016 to have appropriate evidence for any incidents. Information security during disruption. If the organization fails to provide services throughout the information processing environment for any incident or things happens, how actually the organization should provide services? That may be business continuation plan, BCP, and related defined process must to have practiced in that organization. Readiness for business continuity. If any disaster occurs, how actually the organization provides services, the critical services. So there should have some preparedness. And the legal, regulatory, and different contextual requirements must to be monitored, defined, identified as guided in the ISO 27001. The organization should ensure the intellectual property rights. The organization should have some owned source code, programs, software, or others, different assets, information assets that must be protected appropriately to ensure the intellectual property, and should have defined policy, process, and practice. The organization should have different records that must be protected based on their classification and information disclosure mechanism. Privacy and protection of personally identifiable information is very much important, PII. So the persons who are associated with that organization, their personal identifiable information must be protected, and that requirement must be defined and practiced throughout their organization. ISO 27016 to have this practice onboarded by the organization. And the organization should have some independent review of information security mechanism. You guys maintaining and managing the information processing environment, and you are damn sure that you are maintaining the security requirements and appropriately protecting your organization's information. But you should have some independent review by any third party or others team to independently review the security posture of that organization. That's very much important. Compliance with policies, rules, and standard for information security, that's also defined in the ISO 27001. The organization should have some defined policies, rules, some best followed standards to ensure the information security, and the organization should not only follow but also implement the appropriate clauses and requirements to ensure the information security of that organization. And not only the policy but also appropriate procedure must be defined and followed by the concerned team to ensure the security. For example, the database administrator. The database administrator must to have defined procedure how to take backup and how to restore. And in periodical interval, they should practice that whether for any emergency situation, that backup taking and restoration process follows the ultimate backup and restoration process. That's very much important. So these 37 controls are concerned with the organizational control. Now we would like to dig down the people controls. There are 8 controls as suggested by the ISO 27001 2022 version. So first control is screening. Before deploying any resources to the information processing environment, we must to perform the screening. That may be background check or verification from the previous employer or checking the criminal records, etc. So the next control is terms and condition of employment. The organization should have some defined terms and condition for the employee who would be the employee of that organization. The employer must to have defined terms and condition for their employee so that the employee know actually what should be done and what should not to do. Next, information security awareness, education, and training is very much important to ensure the information security. If we develop policies, but we do not aware our people what actually the policies seek, then the policy is useless. So regular training and awareness session is mandatory, and the organization who are willing to implement and get certified through the ISO 27001 must to ensure the appropriate security awareness, education, and training program on regular interval. Disciplinary process. The organization should have defined disciplinary process if any violation occurs as defined in the information security policies of the organization. Remember, the disciplinary process must be fair and consistent, and the organization should ensure that the employees of that organization are aware about the disciplinary process. Then responsibilities after termination or change of employment, that should be defined and must be known by the employee and employer, and the concerned people should act accordingly. For example, one people may resign, but revoking access from the information processing systems is mandatory as per the defined policy and process of that organization. Confidentiality or non-disclosure agreement, very much important. The organization should sign NDA with their people to ensure the confidentiality of information of that organization. And the organization should regularly review and update the NDA as required and if any change occurs. Remote working, very much important in the after COVID situation. So if people would like to work remotely and would get access to the information processing environment of that organization, they should have appropriate protection. For example, secure VPN or providing appropriate guideline how they would perform their daily activities from the remote places. That must be defined and practiced accordingly. Then information security event reporting. If information security related event occurs, the people who is concerned with this or that activities must to report the incident to the appropriate personnel or team of that organization. Is very much important. For example, on resource may guess that his or her computing system working very slowly. They should inform their information security department or the IT team to look after the things why the computing system acting poorly. That's very much important. And if any incident occurs, the resources should report as defined by the organization to the reporting body. So these 8 controls are concerned with the people of that organization. And next, we would like to discuss about the physical controls. There are 14 physical controls requirement in ISO 27001 in the latest edition. First control is the physical security perimeters. Perimeter security. We most of the cases we are very much familiar about the perimeter security. So we should implement different security fence or barrier to protect our information processing environment. We may implement access control systems to protect our information processing environment. Physical entry. For example, biometrics, scanner or card reader may be implemented. Maintaining log for individual entity or any electronic entry control system that may be utilized. Then securing offices, rooms, and facilities. The information processing environment, office, rooms, facilities must to have physical security. The organization should implement that, practice that. And not only implement the security, but also regularly monitor the security, physical security things. For example, installing CCTV and monitoring that 24/7, employing security guards or something like that controls. And protecting physical and environmental threat is very much important. For example, fire. We should have implemented fire suppression systems, a smoke detector system. For to handle any natural disaster, we should have some protection mechanism. The people who are working with the critical information, for example, the DBA, database administrator, or critical resources should have some secured area. Not only that DBA and other resources, all the information processing systems and related activities related resources should handle the information processing systems from the secured area. That's 6 by the ISO 27001. Clear desk, clear escape is very much familiar with us. If we implement, if you would like to comply with the ISO 27001, we should practice the clear desk and clear escape control requirement. Equipment setting and protection. The information processing equipment must be protected as required by that information processing assets. For example, the server may need to have some cooling environment that may have some secured area, data center, and like that. The information processing asset must to protect it as required by that information processing asset. Security of assets of premises. Yeah, someone is writing. We are enjoying. No worries. So, security of assets of premises. Premises security also need to be implemented. Storage media. We utilize a lot of storage media in our day-to-day operational activities. So that must be protected appropriately to ensure the information security requirement. And the supporting utilities, different supporting utilities we may utilize. For example, we may take some manual backup in tape drive or hard disk and set it to a secured location. We utilize some vehicles for that. So we must to ensure the security throughout the transferring of that information assets. Cabling security, that's very much important. We got a lot of incident through the misusing of cabling. So we must to ensure that nobody is able to get connected to the information processing environment by simply plug and play any network cables. That's important. Equipment maintenance. The organization should have defined maintenance mechanism. For example, a regular interval data center assets management and maintenance. For example, the data center may have some different cooling systems. The organization should have defined maintenance schedule so that cooling system are examined in a regular interval to ensure that the data center being cooled as required by the information processing environment. Secure disposal or reuse of equipment, very much important. After the end life of any information processing assets, that must be disposed with some defined process, and the record must be reviewed on regular interval and must be recorded as and when required by that organization. While implementing ISO 27001, we need to have that evidence to show the auditor as part of the evidence of secure disposal. So that's 14 controls are concerned with the physical security of organization. Now we would discuss about the technological control. There are 34 individual controls concerned with the technological controls. So first of all, user endpoint devices. We are providing computer, laptop, computing devices, mobile phones, other different devices to our endpoint users. For example, for the laptop, we are providing to our end user. We must to ensure the disk encryption at least, for example. And we should have defined device management policies that must be circulated, and the end user who are using or utilizing that asset must to have understanding about that process policies, how to handle that asset. Then privileged access rights. The organization may have some privileged user. Their activities must be reviewed on regular interval. For example, the database administrator, the system administrator, network administrator, or some of the critical roles, some maker, checker who have financial transaction limits. So we must to review their access on regular interval, at least once in a calendar year. But if the system is critical, it should be in every 6 months or quarterly. And multi-factor authentication, we discussed about it in earlier. To ensure the access right, we must to implement multi-factor authentication. Then information access restriction. Who have access in which information processing assets environment, that must be defined and controlled appropriately. To do so, we may implement the role-based access control, or the people who are accessing should have some access log, and another team or auditing or monitoring team should review the access on regular basis to ensure whether the defined access is practicing or any violation occurring in that areas. Access to source code, very much important. Source code, for example, the organization may have some software, in-house developed software or application. The source code is very much important. We must to ensure the intellectual property right, we must to restrict the access of the source code. In earlier, I was talking about the developer should not have access to the production system. This is because the developer knows the source code very clearly. And if he or she have the access to the production environment, that may cause some security issues. And the audit team should review the code access on regular interval. Not only the audit department, but also the manager under whom the developer works. Then secure authentication, very much important. It may be biometric authentication, it may be single sign-on or other mechanism, but the authentication system must be secure as required by the ISO 27001. Then capacity management. The organization may utilize a lot of information processing assets, server, network, networking devices, others different assets, but that resource utilization must be monitored appropriately. And the capacity must to handle as per the planning process. For example, you need to have storage for every day's backup. You should plan appropriately how much storage you need for the next 3 months, 6 months, or 1 year. For example, you are ensuring 3 months resources, but after 2 months, while we are going to purchase, or you request your vendor to provide or supply another storage devices, they just reply that import is not possible in this time. So that may have some issues. So capacity planning is very much important to securely operate the information processing environment. Sorry. Protection against malware, very much important. The organization should have anti-malware software systems, employee training and related control, awareness must be built. Management of technical vulnerabilities. The organization may have some technical vulnerabilities in the information processing assets. So regular vulnerabilities assessment and regular patch management may help organization to manage the technical vulnerabilities of that organization on regular interval. Configuration management, very much important. For example, we are using a Windows server that is Windows 2016 version, for example. That server need to have some standard configuration. We must to follow that standard configuration to ensure the security of that server or information processing environment. And on regular interval, we should audit the configuration, whether it is in appropriate manner or not. Then information deletion, very much important. So while we would erase any organizational data, we must to double confirm and securely erase that data. And we should have defined data destruction policy as SIG by the ISO 27001. Data masking, where it is required, the data must to mask. Dynamic data masking on things, static data masking and other things, we may implement that. And masking is very much important. For example, while we would like to communicate confidential or secured information, or for example, organization-wide, there is some data, some people need not to have view permission to look at the whole data. For example, it may be card data or others information. Data leak prevention, very much important. The organization should have defined policy and process to handle the data leakage situation. So the organization may use DLP software. The organization should have appropriately data classification, and after classifying, they may implement the data leakage prevention solution, DLP, or the organization may block their USB or others data leakage path to ensure the protection of the data disclosure. Information backup, the organization should have appropriate information backup. This is because it's very much concerned nowadays about the ransomware and others negative events. So we may have automated or manual backup systems, but considering the backup mechanism and RTO and RPO, we must to ensure the data backup of that organization. Redundancy of information processing facilities. The organization should have redundant information processing environment. If they provide critical services, they must to have DR site and different load balancing mechanism. Logging, the organization may not may but should implement the logging facilities. Centralized logging system would collect the log of all the associated information processing assets, and there should have some log analyzer. Maybe is in the SIM, Security Information Event Management Solution Systems. Monitoring activities, the organization should have real-time monitoring tools and incident management team to monitor the whole information processing environment. And is there any unnecessary or inception happening, the incident management team must to monitor that things around the clock 24/7. Clock synchronization, the organization may utilize different server services, but all that systems must to take time from a centralized time server or NTP server, and the team must to review or audit the time synchronization. For example, your ATM may have on time, your payment system may have another time, your CCTV may have different time. So after any incident, while you would like to investigate that incident, you may review the CCTV record, but the CCTV record time, ATM time, payment system time may differ. So it would very difficult to identify the actual time and events appropriately. So clock synchronization is very much important in your information processing environment. Use of privileged utility program. So the organization may use different applications, softwares, different utility, but there should have some control, strict access control, and who are using that specific utility. For example, one team may have access the Adobe Premiere suites. Other team are not utilizing, but the team who are utilizing that Adobe Premiere suites, there should have some monitoring whether any unnecessary activities is being performed by the concerned team or personnel. Installation of software on operational systems, very much important. The end user or systems should have some restriction which software is to be installed or utilized. So the organization should have a defined set of tool set for which category of users get what category of tools and software, and on regular interval that information processing assets must be analyzed whether unnecessary tools or software is being installed or not. Network security, very much important. The organization should implement firewall, IDS, IPS, and related network security tools, and there should have appropriate control to ensure the network security of that organization. And network services security, the organization may implement intrusion detection systems or different security tools, and the organization should assess the security of the network devices and services on regular interval. Then segregation of networks, very much important. The organization should have different virtual or physical network segregation. For example, one organization may operate card data, payment card data. That payment card must to have some separate zone to process. For example, we got very often that some, for example, financial institution, there is ATM services and branch operation. The team there, they utilize the same network systems to pass both the ATM transaction and card related transaction and the branch related communication. So there should have some at least logical segregation, so to ensure the segregation of networks. And also the production environment and test environment must be separated accordingly. Web filtering, the organization should have appropriate web filtering mechanism to which web resources to be accessed by that employee, or to which information assets should to disclose information throughout the internet. Maybe the organization utilize some web filtering tools. Utilization of cryptography. For secure communication, the organization should utilize cryptography so that the information, critical information, are being encrypted to ensure the confidentiality of that information. Secure development life cycle. The organization, if they have internal development, software or others development, they should follow the secure development methodologies to develop their application or software. Application security requirements. The organization may have one or more applications or softwares. They must to ensure the requirements of application security. The Open Web Application Security Project was mainly produces different security requirements from the application or software. Not only us, but NIST and some of the other organization also publish some related controls. Secure system architecture and engineering principles. The organization should have defined secure system architecture methodology and ensure that any sensitive information are not being disclosed throughout the information processing environment. Secure coding. While the developer develop their software, must to follow the secure coding formula. Security testing in development and acceptance. While the development team would develop their software or solution, they should practice or implement that in the testing environment, and after passing the QAT, UAT, and others acceptance phase, then it should deploy to the production environment following the appropriate norms, requirements, and policy of the organization. There should have defined policies and procedure. Outsourced development. If the organization purchases any outsourced solution, they should identify and analyze their assets appropriately before purchasing. Separation of development, test, and production environment. As I was discussing earlier, that development, test, and production environment must be separated, and there must to have separate network. It would be better if that physically separated. Change management, very much important. Throughout the information processing environment, changes are continuous process. So we must to ensure that changes are managed appropriately. And we need to preserve that change documents, and we may utilize some automated tools to track the changes in the information processing environment. Test information. In some cases, in development phase, we may utilize some test data of the organization. For example, in banking industry, while developing some solution or software, we may utilize production data in the test environment, but that data must be sanitized and ensure that that test data is representative but does not contain the actual sensitive information. And after testing, the data must be disposed following the disposal procedure of that organization. And the last control of technological control is protection of information system during audit testing. For any audit or security testing or audit testing, the organization may utilize some data. In this case, we may provide access only, read only, or shadowing technique may be applied to provide access to the auditor. And it's very much important for the third-party auditor, while we engage some third-party auditor, there should provide the data for the audit following the data disclosure policy and process of that organization. That's very much important. So we have discussed so far 34 technological control. Now we would discuss about how we would create a information security culture so that as a whole we could implement the ISO 27001 very effectively and easily. First of all, the organization should establish the objectives, information security objectives, in different functional level of the organization. And that information security requirement or objectives must be consistent. Must be consistent with the information security policy of the organization. And it should be measurable. And we should define and identify the requirements, actual requirements to ensure the applicable information security. Following a defined and appropriate risk assessment process. If we find out the requirements throughout an appropriate risk assessment process, we may identify which controls are available in this organization. Some of them, there may have some control, they are weak. There is or there are some absence of control. So is the fact we could identify the actual requirements throughout this risk assessment process. And then to ensure the treatment, risk treatment, we should improve the existing control or implement some new controls. And after identifying and managing, we should monitor appropriately, and for any issues or any change or any unusual activities, we should communicate the findings to the appropriate parties so that we could update the requirement appropriately. And further, that requirements need to be documented for lesson learned and for future enhancement of the required policies and process. So if an organization be consistent with their information security policy, should have some measurable requirements following an appropriate risk assessment process, they monitor and communicate any issues and update them accordingly and make that available to the interested parties, then only we may ensure that the appropriate security culture is practiced throughout that organization. So to do so, we need to have some question. What would be done? What resources will be required? Who is actually the responsible person? When it to be completed? And how the results will be evaluated? If that questions could produce some appropriate results, and if we could measure that, gauge that, identify that, and if we could answer that appropriately, then only we could tell that the organization is following the security and cybersecurity culture. And if that culture established in that organization, only then implementing the ISO 27001 is possible. And following these terms and conditions, if we then implement that information processing systems, security systems, then the ISO 27001 would produce the maximum value. So not only implementation, but also another clause defined by the ISO 27001, the organization shall continuously improve the suitability, adequacy, and effectiveness of the information security management systems. That means this ISO 27001, once implemented, we must to improve it continuously. We need to identify the organization practice the ISO 27001 in some suitable cases. Suitable means that is applicable for that organization, whether they are adequate or not, and whether the control are working effectively or not. If that things works harmoniously, then only information security management systems of that organization is obviously executable, and only then we could get benefit by implementing the ISO 27001. So this framework is a worldwide utilized framework for ensuring the information security management systems. Some people tell that ISO is a framework, only 6 different documentations, and if we have appropriate documentations, certification is very easy. That is true, but the 93 controls we have discussed here is control need to be implemented as required by that organization appropriately to ensure that the information processing environment of that organization is properly protected by an appropriate risk assessment and treatment process, and the organization continuously improve the requirements and practice to ensure and enhance the ultimate requirement of information processing systems security requirements. So this all about the 93 controls of ISO 27001, and we tried to have a basic understanding of each of the control so that we could understand each control and implement that in our organization, which controls are applicable for my organization, and if so, we could understand each and every clauses and the requirements. Only then we could ensure the security of my organization. So we titled this discussion ISO 2700 on awareness session. So that's for all. We would like to take questions from you guys. I would request who have questions, please let us know. We are ready to get questions. Yeah, we get a hand raised from Sheikh Russell Bhai, please.
Thank you so much for arranging this great program. I enjoyed a lot. It's full of comprehensive information. That's really build up the awareness regarding this framework. I wanted to ask some questions. So there are 93 controls here. So if my organization is like small, medium, or a large enterprise environment, so all 93 controls equally required to be complied with this standard, or I can find I can customize those controls, what is required for my organization. This is the first question. And then our company could be like standardized or certified with this framework, that's fine. But as a cybersecurity professionals, we have seen that you have some designation already, you have added with your name. So as a cybersecurity professional, what certification I can achieve, and what's the organization that can help me? Thank you.
Thank you, Russell bhai. It's a nice question. We got two relevant questions. One is we are enjoying or we are following the requirements of ISO 27001. My organization is small or medium or large. Which control is concerned with my organization? Nice question. First of all, ISO 27001 latest version has 93 core controls. The 93 controls seeks to implement simultaneously to ensure the security and related information protection. But one organization may not have some controls. For example, we are discussing one organization may not have their cloud services. So the cloud related control is not applicable for that organization. So before implementing any ISO framework, the auditor and the implementation team first define the applicability statement of applicability. There is a term, statement of applicability, which control is concerned and applicable for that organization must to identify, and that is identified through a formal risk assessment process. While we perform the risk assessment, you first identify your assets, and then following the risk assessment process, you have to perform the risk assessment. And doing so, you must identify which control is required for your organization or not. But the thing is, the ISO 27001, though there are 93 controls, some organization may have applicable 80 controls, may have 65 controls. But if one control is applicable for that organization, the organization may be a small, medium, or large, that not the matter. They must to implement that. For example, the organization may have some limited scale information processing environment, but the data disclosure control or the incident response control must to have implemented there. The organization may have private, public, or a small, medium, but that organization should have that incident management framework and process. So the answer is you may customize the standard as required by your organization following a standard risk assessment process, and for which control are applicable for that organization must to implement appropriately for both the small, medium, or large size organization in same pattern manner. And second question is yes, nice, congratulations that your organization is ISO certified, and we appreciate for that. And in next step, if you consider to handle the latest cybersecurity events and things, you must to have some standard learning about the security engineering. So there are three different areas: security engineering on domain, security auditing another domain, and security manager, it's another domain. You would like to become a security manager, you must to achieve you may achieve CISSP certifications, and you may handle your information processing environment following that guideline. If you would like to get interest in the auditing environment, you may have some ISO and related auditing certifications, professional certifications. And security engineering is another things. You if you would like to get some deeper in the engineering phase, you should achieve some of that engineering area. For example, ISO lead implementer is one kinds of engineering. It may be I achieved OSCP, that's also concerned with the mostly concerned with the security and security engineering. So things are not like that we have to achieve some certifications, but thing is to understand the requirement or the information processing environment seeks to have to ensure the protection of that organization and that information processing environment. I believe high level I could give you the answer in high level. Thank you, Russell bhai.
Thank you so much. It was a really comprehensive answer. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Hello, can you listen?
Yeah. Yeah, please.
I am in an organization where I have a little question, like in IS head, will be report whom? Like you will report to direct CEO or you will report the COO, whereas the COO have the also the CTO in under COO. So, and the next question will be like, can auditor get the all information from different department? Like sometimes I face like they will share some screenshot. They have the full HS list, but when I get asked to share with me, they will map some information, but they cannot share me the full information. Is there any? I think can we ask them something like that? And third question will be that: is there any solution that a identity and access control monitoring team will have supervision the wall access or something like that, the wall user and who have the permission of something like that?
Thank you. We got 3 questions. First one is the auditor report to whom is very much important.
No, sir. I asked him that the IS head, information security head, will be reporting whom.
Yeah. So I'm going in that places.
Thank you.
Thing is borderly there are 3 different area. One thing is security implementer. Security implementer, they are concerned with to implement the security requirements. For example, the network security must to ensure the network administrator implement firewall and other things. He is or she is implementer, and there is another team who perform the assess the actual security, whether security appropriately implemented or not. They are the security assessor. The security assessor exercise and assess the implemented things that is already implemented by the security implementer, and the assessor assess things considering the best practices and some frameworks. Another team is auditor. Auditor roughly works on sample basis, and their task is mostly conducted after some incident or on a regular interval. So the security implementer should report to the implementation team, for most of the cases the CTO, who is concerned with implementing the technology and related requirements. The security assessor should have some different reporting line. It may be the CRO of that organization. Most of the cases, this is because operational activities is executed by the operation team, and risk team is totally different. The operation team should not have engaged with the risk, and the risk reporting line should not engage with the operational activities. So the operational and risk team must be segregated and separate. So the operational team would operate things and report the operational management. The security team should report to the risk, who is the ultimate risk owner of the organization, should be the reporting line. And the auditor is concerned with the assurance providing services. auditor ultimately provide assurance to the owner of that organization that things are going good. So the ultimate owner, the board, should have two parts. One part is the operational part, another part is the assurance part. So for operational part, the board engages MD and CEO, and the assurance part, the board engages the auditor. It may be internal auditor or external auditor, but the standard reporting line should be the board. This is because the team auditor is working to assure or provide assurance to the board of directors as per the standard phenomena. Question 2. As auditor assigned by the board or audit committee of the board, the auditor should have some independency. If the board wants to get the full picture of that organization, the auditor should have access to the whole and required access in the information processing environment. If the board define the audit charter appropriately, the auditor may use that to seek information from the implementation team or assessment team that to meet the audit charter requirement, we need to have this information and data. And if your audit charter does not seek to have you the access in all areas, they are not bound to provide or deliver you that data. It's concerned with the audit charter, and the audit charter is defined and approved by the board, or at least audit committee of board, or at least senior management in some small organization. So I have answered question 1. Question 2. I forgot about the last question. Could you please-
I'm asking about the access control team and identity.
Yeah. I recall. Yes, there is some mechanism and tools. For example, if you are a banking organization, you may have some core banking system, for example, or others organization, you may have some ERP systems. The systems may have or should have, if that systems comes from some international brand, they must have some event log, security log, audit log that actually identifies the change or modification. And if you have appropriate event management or monitoring tools, if you configure that appropriately, you should have the mechanism to review that. But for the sake of independency, as today I am discussing like an auditor, I'm not able to nominate any specific software or solution, but yes, there is some solutions and there is some mechanism to identify the anomaly and abnormal activities.
Got your point, and thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Welcome. We have some chat box. How can a person get ISO 27001 vendor exam and certification for himself? Yeah. Ranbhai asked to have the ISO 27001 exam and certification. Yeah, as a ISO 27001 lead auditor, we also conduct a lead auditor 5-day long training with vendor exam and certification. And in next month, January 15, we are going to start our next batch of ISO 27001 training and certification program. So I would request Ranbhai to contact so that we could onboard you in that session. And Asim Raja, brother from UAE, asked, hello, my question, how we can remember causes as normally we see in interview they ask that tell in this clause know what is happening. Yes, while you are an auditor, people whom are in your opposite side, they would try to understand you that is there is some this control, that control. Some of them may not help you appropriately. Some of them may try to divert you in some another route. But as discussed in the today's session, for each clause we have discussed a very high level requirements, what actually we need to do and what we actually would like to practice. So following the standard, we, the auditor, first identify some questions and ask the concerned team to get response. And in some cases, we actually seek some evidence. So some people may normally try to avoid providing evidence or answering questions, but is the concern with the auditor and is the capacity of the auditor how they can convince them and get the appropriate evidence and interview questions. So so far I understand that from the question from Asim Raja, I answered, but if you have specific any more question, please let me know. Nishad Babu, as a student, how can I prepare myself for ISO? Yes, your first duty is to complete your study first, and gradually you should enhance your knowledge. And immediate after graduation, you may achieve the certification to more appropriately implement your knowledge in your upcoming organization. There are so many control for security measures. Can we got easy solution in it upcoming days? What? Yeah, there is a lot of controls, but as part of our regular activities, at least monthly in on session, we would open for our audience to discuss that controls again and again so that we could understand things. Yes, we are open to all who are willing to understand things. Rahan bhai, yes, you have a query, please.
Assalamu alaikum.
Salam, please.
First of all, I'd like to give a special thanks to you, my dear mentor, for arranging such a great session. So my question is, in internal audit part, basically, what is the audit scope of internal audit team? Is it mandatory to cover full framework for the internal audit team? So for in case for a small or medium organization where internal audit team is not available, so what could they do? And my second question is, how we can engage our high level management into this framework where they are bothered about only business? Please.
Nice question. Rahan bhai, first of all, what would be the scope actually? Thing is, first of all, there is some Bengali proverb, Je Radhe she chul badhe. I don't know the English of this proverb, but thing is, who actually implementing the information processing environment and information systems? his or her responsibility is to implement appropriately so that things are protected in terms of cybersecurity or information security. So
Yes.
who actually would implement things should have appropriate control. But for the sake of faster delivery, some of the cases, our people, most of the cases do not engage with that. So who are concerned to implement, they must to implement that knowing the appropriate requirements of information security and cyber security. So what actually would be the scope if any internal audit team is not available there? Thing is, yes, the implementer is responsible to implement the things appropriately. So actually there is no need of auditor, but the organization should have different independent team to randomly identify the things what actually people's practicing. So is the fact the audit team appears here. But if you don't have the audit team, you should identify your assets, which assets are concerned with providing services and operations to your clients or interested parties, and following an standard risk assessment and part of risk management process, you should identify the scope. Actually, the scope comes from the risk assessment. It's very much important. If we could fail to identify the appropriate assets concerned with our organization, we fail to perform the risk assessment. And if we could identify, we fail to identify the appropriate risk, then it's not possible to identify the scope and the implementation of information security controls. So risk assessment is very much important. Following an appropriate risk assessment, you should identify which asset should to have under the umbrella of this ISO 27001. And then you should define the statement of applicability. That means which control is concerned with that information processing environment or asset to follow the ISO 27001. Then only you may define the scope. I think that's one question. Another thing is how is possible to engage senior management. Yes, implementing and ensuring security, that's mainly concerned with the senior management. Remember that governance means the organization deliver values at the end of day, and the risk associated with that engagement is properly maintained. So the governance have two delivery. First thing is the organization deliver values, and second thing is the organization manage the risk appropriately. And that is the ultimate governance activities. And this tone is set by the board of the director. The board of the director would like to get revenue at the day end, and also would like to get ensured that in the near future they would get the same kinds of revenue from that organization. To ensure that risk management is very much important. For example, you may have a super shop in a busy area, but as a operation manager, you just perform the day-to-day operation. But in the rainy season, the road in front of that super shop goes under water, and people may not come to the super shop. You never identified that, and in the rainy season, for the long time, 1 month, the people could not come to your super shop and they could not buy. So is the fact you could not deliver any revenue to the shop owner. So that is not the ultimate governance. The governance is you should deliver value, as well as you should ensure and manage the concerned risk associated with that operation. So it's the responsibilities of the board of directors to ensure the governance. Governance has two legs. One is value delivery, another is risk management. So risk management is very much important part, and to ensure the risk management process, the organization should consider implementing the security, cybersecurity, and related process implementing throughout the organization. And to do so, the board of directors engage some third party. They are the auditor who provide the independent assurance that yes, things are going good. I believe I'm able to answer you, Ranvai.
My dear mentor, thank you so very much. But the reality is totally different for the higher management to engaging in the framework. It's too difficult, and the reality is totally different for our
Yeah,
our.
but thing is, it's our responsibility to get them learn that things are happening like this. So if you properly identify the risk and report to the risk owner, the CRO of that organization, I believe the understanding would become fruitful.
Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you. So is there any question? We are in the eve of the session. We have only 2 minutes in our capacity. So within 2 minutes, we may get on more questions. Sabbir Bhai asked another question. I want to the process of ISO 27004 and organization. Yeah, actually, please keep connected with MSCT and QPro team. My team obviously would help you to get required documents and processes. So if there's no more question, would like to end today's session. Thank you everybody who have joined this session, and obviously we would conduct this kinds of session occasionally, and I would request both QPro and MSCT team to arrange these kinds of session once in at least in a month, so that we could discuss and deliver much more things to the audience. And thank you everybody again to join this session, and best of luck. Bye. Monojit Kumar, Dada, you have a question. Yeah, we have 1 minute, so we may take that question, please.
Yes, good evening. My question is, whenever we create a scope of applicability, there are certain controls which we intake, certain controls we exclude. So what is the provision through which we give a justification as to what are being included and what are being excluded? So what kind of justification do we give, sir? Thank you.
Welcome, and it's a nice question. So I discussed this earlier that mostly this task comes from the risk assessment. The justification would comes from the risk assessment. If you have such kinds of information processing environment and assets associated activities, the risk assessment process would bring you the things and the justification that you should attend this and you should avoid this. So risk assessment is the ultimate key pillar here. I think you got the answer. Okay, thank you everybody again, and bye for today. hopefully to meet again in some another session. Thank you. Bye.